Is it just me, or is Earthrise such an unmemorable, ephemeral mirage of a toy line? When it was first announced, I thought it was going to be a line as big and bombastic as Siege was, introducing tons of new bases for fans to tinker around with, but in the end, we're stuck with a bare-bones shit show that's only 3 waves long, with nearly half the lineup as some bullshit sold-out exclusive or another, which will remain overshadowed by my Siege collection on the shelf, and will be doubly overshadowed by the luxurious Kingdom line due next year. The literal only saving grace of Earthrise is the fact that it completed a subgroup or two. Such is the case of today's review. Welcome to Kit Katastrophe. My name is Kit, and today we'll be taking a look at Transformers Earthrise Voyager-class Decepticon Snapdragon. This figure was released in 2020 as part of Wave 2 of the Voyager assortment. Protocol dictates I start out by showing off the Titan Master before moving on to the Transtector, so the unnamed Titan Master who comes with Snapdragon looks very nice. The listing on Hasbro Pulse gave him the name Decepticon Krunk, which I will refer to him by for the remainder of the review, but since the name appears nowhere on the packaging or instructions, I just call him an unnamed Titan Master for cataloging purposes. Also, it saves precious characters in the video title. Krunk is an average Titan Master with an above-average amount of paint, as all the fuchsia on his arms and legs is paint, as well as the purple face and red visor. The black plastic used on the torso makes it so that the sculpted detail is shown in stark relief when put under the right lighting conditions. Krunk features standard Titan Master articulation and compatibility with the foot pegs found on most Titan Return figures and Siege Apeface. The thing that separates him from his twin Spasma is the extremely normal placement of Snapdragon's face sculpt, as opposed to Apeface's sculpt appearing on Spasma's legs. This makes Spasma the only Titan Master to date to do this, and it makes me wonder what the designers were thinking. The only really weird thing about Krunk is these 2 big spikes on his shoulders, but those serve a good purpose later. For now, let's get him into the cockpit. Snapdragon's main alternate mode, much like Apeface, is a Cybertronian spaceship of some kind or other. Unlike Apeface, Snapdragon actually succeeds in managing to look good in this mode. While Apeface turned into a bar of soap with wings and a cockpit, Snapdragon's alternate mode is a fully formed and rather sleek dart of a vessel, featuring more than a passing resemblance to an alienized Blackbird now that I think about it. Mostly it looks like a more developed and specialized version of Overlord's jet mode. They probably work as a team or something, I don't know. I really like the separation of color by the coronal plane. If it weren't for the engines being cast in all white, it could be interpreted as a kind of camouflage, with the black side always being seen from below, blending into the night sky. I suppose it could be construed as some kind of heat shielding as seen on the space shuttle, if nothing else. Speaking of the engines, this is where the vehicle mode suffers the most, as the entire rear of the jet is broken up and just doesn't look cohesive at all. The robot mode hands are visible in those thrusters as well as the elbow joints being visible, compounding the issue. I wish the robot mode arms could compress lengthwise to get a cleaner jet mode, but I guess it could be worse, as from almost every other angle this jet mode looks amazing, which is a far cry from Apeface's abject failures. I really like the use of turquoise on the rear stabilizers and some extra detail on the main fuselage. The cockpit doors used to access Krunk are actually really difficult to get open, at least on my copy. They're also made of a translucent yellow plastic, meaning that some amount of care should be taken trying to open them. More often than not, it's easier to get Krunk in and out by splitting Snapdragon's legs and accessing the cockpit that way. Once it's open, however, you'll find the cockpit to have a painted interior with abstracted buttons and dials. As far as I know, it's a unique feature to Snapdragon alone, and it's pretty cool. As for other features, Snapdragon has retractable landing gear in the form of one single wheel at the front, and nothing else. Some landing that must be. Snapdragon also comes with 2 guns, which can be placed in any of the 5mm ports scattered across this jet, though my preferred option is slung under the wings. The transformation between both of Snapdragon's 2 alternate modes is extremely simple, but I feel it does a reasonable effort in reshaping the proportions of the jet to get an actual beast out of it. The bulky rear end of the jet slides down on a double hinge to bulk out the main mass of the beast mode, leaving a tapered torso. I really love how the cockpit section was engineered to hinge so that the tail could have a natural looking bend to it. Much like on Apeface, Snapdragon's Titan Master transforms into part of the Beast Mode head. Remember those spikes on Krunk's shoulders? They're meant to become the coloration in Snapdragon's eyes, bringing this massive beast to life. As far as beast modes go, Snapdragon's is pretty ramshackle. It's pretty clear just by taking a short glance at it that most of the engineering focus went towards the jet mode, which seems to me to be a contrast to Apeface, who I feel focused more on his beast mode. While I mentioned during transformation that the intent was most likely to form a more tapered torso for this massive lizard, the transition between the torso mass and the hips is jarring and sudden, almost as if there was meant to be more here. The tail is wide and flat, and while it has some nice ridged details to separate it from its jet mode purpose, it makes everything above the hips look underdeveloped. The head is probably the worst part of this mode. While I appreciate the attempt at recreating the gimmick of the original Generation 1 figure, forming the jaw from Krunk's legs looks awkward in just about every single configuration. There's no way for Snapdragon to convincingly close his mouth, meaning he looks like a mouth breather who huffed glue one too many times. The guns from earlier have 2 new ports they can peg into, which are specifically intended for this mode. I dig the look, he reminds me of Ripper Snapper like this. As someone would reasonably expect, Snapdragon's beast mode is limited in its articulation. Starting at the head, the jaw can open and close. It's not much of a closure, I'd say. The head can look up, and the neck can also move around. The head can look down, but it does get blocked by Snapdragon's own faceplate. And that's it for the head. It's better than nothing, I'd say, but it's still not great. The shoulders can move forward on a swivel joint, and the elbows are ball jointed. They can bend forward so far. They can't bend backward, but they can move outwards or inwards so that he may scheme or plead for a cookie or some sort of treat. The legs can move forward at the hip all the way around, and they can move backwards, of course, as well. They can move outwards a fair deal until the spires up on top of the hips bang into the back mass. The thighs can swivel 360 degrees. These are also the robot biceps, mind you. And the knees can bend backwards, or you can break the knees and make them bend forwards. Also, the ankles can bend forward for walking positions and some such. Finally, the tip of the tail can also point upwards in case you have him standing more upright, like a very outdated dinosaur diagram, so that Snapdragon's tail can get out of the way of the floor. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Snapdragon's Beast Mode. It's, like I said, it's very limited, but it does offer some cute little features. It's not the worst thing in the world, it's just a tertiary mode. The transformation into robot mode from either of Snapdragon's alternate modes is arguably less complex than that of the Beast Mode, considering that pretty much every trick you use to form the robot or jet is used to make the Beast Mode, whereas transformation into Beast Mode features some more hidden treats, if that makes any sense. If you were to go straight from jet to robot, it would be quite a boring affair. Snapdragon is one of those figures where what you see is exactly what you get, and he makes no attempt to surprise you. I don't even know what else there is to say about this transformation, as it's so unremarkable. Robot mode, arguably, is where Snapdragon looks best. That is, it's the mode where he's the least compromised. As far as Decepticon designs go, I feel Snapdragon's is a little more forgettable than most. Compared to Apeface, who, despite having a much worse blend of white plastic, looks a lot better in the proportions department, Snapdragon just looks a bit bland and stodgy. He's a lot smoother in shape than Apeface, mostly due to those round nacelles forming the arms, but the designers try to give him the same boxy torso and legs. I feel like rounding everything off more would do wonders to both complement and separate him from his teammate, even if that comes at the cost of G1 accuracy. That's not to say that Snapdragon has a bad robot mode, or even that I dislike it, but it has potential to be so much better. With that nitpicking tangent out of the way, I do like how much more black and purple is revealed in this mode, even if most of it was already visible in Dragon mode. I do wish there could be more components painted in that same turquoise as seen in the jet fins and dragon arms, simply to make him stand out a little more. Maybe put some on that big box on his chest? Or running down his legs? It'd be cool if we got some of that turquoise instead of the fuchsia visor on Snapdragon's unorthodox head sculpt. Most Titan Master compatible figures tend to feature squared-off face sculpts, while Earthrise Snapdragon faithfully renders the original pointy helmet without compromising the proportions. He kinda looks like a knockoff Soundwave, I think. Since I've already mentioned Snapdragon's twin rifles twice before already, there's really not much else to say about them now. The guns are cast in the same purple as is found all over Snapdragon's body, and the sculpt seems simultaneously overdone but inconsequential. It would be nice if they could partake in the writhing plastic orgy that the siege weapons were invited to, but they're serviceable. Now, unlike Snapdragon's Beast Mode, Snapdragon's Robot Mode is a lot less limited in its articulation. Starting at the head, it has a typical Titan's Return ball joint. That means that the only real effective range of motion is side to side. There is a slight degree of upwards and downwards motion, a slight tilt, but it's not really all that useful compared to left and right motion. The arms are the Beast Mode shoulders. They rotate forward and backward 360 degrees, and they can go a lot further outward because they don't bang into the dragon torso. Instead, they rest nicely on Snapdragon's own shoulder mass. The biceps swivels 360 degrees, though these fins can get caught on the fins up here. And the elbows don't even bend 90 degrees, which means this figure is getting thrown in the trash when I'm done reviewing it. They can also bend backwards if that's your thing. There's nothing at the wrist, or at least nothing at the wrist that's meant to be for the robot mode, but you can tilt the wrist backward if you have like a sword for this character, so you can get some more natural looking sword poses, though that does come with the cost of moving these claws out of place. There's really nothing you can do about that. That's a little disappointing. The waist rotation is astonishingly free because this back plate does not get in the way of these hips, which is really nice. The hips move forward and backward all the way, though they do get obstructed by this back plate just a tiny bit. They move outwards all the way, which is nice, and the thighs rotate 360 degrees. The knees bend just about 90 degrees, which is, serviceable. And the ankles can pivot a really great deal, which means he can get some extremely wide-legged stances. And finally, the ankles can move forward, though that's more for transformation, though I guess you could make him lean forward like Michael Jackson. This, coupled with the fact that the knees have a little bend in the opposite direction, means that you can give him that sort of animated Optimus Prime-esque hero pose, where the pelvis is a little bit in front of the knees, which gives this really nice S-curve on the body, which makes his poses that much more dynamic, which is really a godsend for this guy. It gives him a little bit of character that you wouldn't really expect, and I just really like it. So, yeah, that's Snapdragon in a nutshell. He doesn't really have anything special to him. In fact, he's a little more limited than many other Earthrise figures, but he is still enjoyable, and he does have a nice little surprise. For the people who have been patiently waiting for a Generation Snapdragon to place on a shelf alongside last year's Apeface, I feel the Earthrise figure will whet their appetite well enough. Even more so for the people who found Apeface to be lacking as I had. Don't get me wrong, both figures have some serious issues. While Snapdragon doesn't share Apeface's god-awful excuse for white plastic, he does have a pretty subpar beast mode, though really that's more a problem with triple changers in general than anything else. And his other two modes are kinda boring. Really, it's the triple changing headmaster gimmick that really sells this figure. If nothing else, it's another Decepticon you can add to your generation shelf, which I'm all for. At the end of the day, Snapdragon edges out his companion in terms of quality and earns himself the rank of crummy. If you liked this video or otherwise found it helpful or informative, then please subscribe for more reviews like this in the future, and feel free to suggest topics for future reviews in the comments. When we return, I'll be reviewing the final Studio Series Constructicon. No, I'm not getting Skipjack, why do you ask? This has been Katastrophe. Transform and roll out.